You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
The thing about a Mustang is they will change your life in some way. So if you're looking to kind of deepen your experience with horses and learning about connection and going up a level and learning about horses just in general, Mustangs are amazing teachers, and they also teach us a lot about ourselves. So if you want to have experiences that help you be better, then, Mustangs are an amazing way to go.
Welcome to the Practical Horseman podcast, featuring conversations with respected riders, industry leaders, and horse care experts. The show is co-hosted by Practical Horseman editors, and our goal is to inform, educate, and inspire. I'm Julia Boughtonhouse, and this week's episode is with 5-star eventer and Mustang trainer Elisa Wallace. Elisa knows more than a thing or two about the American Mustang, but it wasn't always that way. During a year when her top-level horses were injured, she used the time to check off a bucket list item: to train a Mustang. A friend of hers signed her up for a Mustang makeover competition, and Elisa thought it would be a good opportunity to demonstrate her skills and promote herself as a trainer. Well, at the end of that makeover competition, Elisa had fallen in love with her Mustang, Fledge, and had caught the Mustang bug. Fast forward to present day, Elisa is a Mustang expert, the proud owner of 5 Mustangs, and she plans to add one more to the family to compete in the 2024 Mustang Classic. But the average person doesn't know much about the American Mustang. How do you buy or adopt one? Where do they come from? How do you train them? What disciplines are they good for? In this episode, Elisa answers all of those questions and more, and she shares her personal experience with Mustangs. Before we get into the podcast with Elisa, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this week's episode, the Mustang Classic, and share their message. Coming to Rolex Stadium at the Kentucky Horse Park in September 2024, the Mustang Classic. Mustangs will compete for a $125,000 total purse, with $50,000 going to the champion. The first of its kind English discipline competition will involve dressage, show jumping, arena cross country, and working equitation. Come compete. Adopt or purchase your Mustang by June 1st, 2024. Or join us in September as we celebrate American Mustangs in Rolex Stadium. For more information, go to mustangclassic2024.com. Now, enjoy the episode with Elisa. So I have eventer and Mustang trainer Elisa Wallace with me today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't think of a better person to talk to about Mustangs because you are very well known as a Mustang trainer. And with the 2024 Mustang Classic ahead of us and your plans to participate in it, I was wondering if I could ask you some questions about your experience with Mustangs.
Oh, for sure.
So just to get started, I am so curious how you even got involved with Mustangs to begin with. Like, what drew you to them?
So it's kind of a funny story. A really good friend of mine, I had followed her, and she had been training Mustangs and was doing the Mustang makeover competitions. And I thought it was really fun to kind of watch the transformation process with the horses. And it was a year when my top level event horses were injured, and I only had some young horses. So it was kind of slow and always on the bucket list to train a Mustang. And it just so happened that my friend, Rebecca Bowman, that she was like, hey, so I sent you the application. There's a South Carolina makeover, and I kind of like signed you up basically for it. And so that's kind of like how I decided to do my first makeover. And I thought, that would be perfect to really display my training skills and kind of help me promote myself as a trainer. And, again, it was on the bucket list. So all those things. And that would have been with Fledge, who was my first Mustang. And you know, I was not planning on keeping him. I mean, I'm a 3-day eventer. What am I going to do with a 13 3-hand Mustang? Right? So, but then about 30 days in, the thought of him leaving me like brought me to tears. So I kind of decided I was going to keep him. And, you know, that little horse has done so much I've done so many things thanks to Fledge. And just, he's actually helped me in turn get my upper level, my Johnny, the Simply Priceless horse, who I ended up doing 5 stars. And the owners, you know, knew me because of how when I rode Fledge. And so he's just really kind of getting into the Mustangs has made me a little different in some ways, but they have really expanded and opened my horizons. And I always think it's really important to learn through different disciplines and kind of like pushing myself outside of my box. And it's been really great having the Mustangs because they do a good job of, you know, grounding us a little bit. And and that's what I really like about doing them. But yeah, I was kind of rambling on, but that's how I got into doing the Mustangs. And then they're basically very addictive. So I couldn't just do one.
And like horses aren't addictive enough. And then you get a Mustang in your life and it gets even worse.
Right. Exactly.
Could you speak to the process of adopting a Mustang a little bit? What does that look like?
So there's it can look at several ways in acquiring one. So kind of like these competitions that we have now, the makeover competitions. It's kind of the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management's ways of bridging the gap from having a wild horse to then having a horse that's, you know, trained like a green horse by the end of 120 days. So the public can be a little bit more ready for that than just taking home a wild horse. So those are trainer incentive programs where, you know, the competitions have prize money and stuff, but then we're able to train the Mustang and then they go to the competition and the public is then at the end of the competition can do a bidding process on those horses and acquire them that way. Then the BLM also has what's called internet adoptions, where you can just go and pick out a Mustang that they have posted, and it goes through an auction process, and you can adopt a horse, and it's wild. So then you're responsible for having the proper facilities. So that would require a 6-foot paneling, because they can jump 6 foot. And so in the proper size. So either a round pen and then depending on where you live, some of the requirements are different. So for instance, for Florida, you don't have to have a shelter. You just have to have trees and so proper shade and 6-foot fencing, proper fencing made out of pipe or wood. And then the last way is through, satellite adoptions, where BLM again will be sending some horses to certain places around the United States, and you can go and you can adopt a horse for $125 and pick up your horse that way. But then again, you're still responsible for training that horse. And so that's where it's kind of interesting with the makeover program. And then also they have the trainer incentive program where you can have a trainer pick out a horse and do your basic halter, trailer loading, picking up all 4 feet. And the trainer gets an incentive from the BLM, and then you have a horse that's kind of ready to start under saddle. So, you know, there's those ways to kind of try to bridge the gap. And I really like the idea of the competition that they're doing this year for the new English competition, the Mustang Classic, because it's a longer based competition. And I think that's really great to have that time to bring those horses along. And so I think that's going to be very exciting.
So which route have you gone in the past, or would you typically go to acquire a Mustang?
Oh, I think I've done all the above.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
right. So, you know, because the makeovers are every horse that competes in a makeover has to be run through the public. The public has to have a chance to bid on it. So, I had to win a couple of my horses back after the competition. So Fledge, I bid on in one, and then Win I did as well, and then also my other horse Rune that I had for the Mustang Million, we had the auction in the beginning, so I got him kind of in the beginning. But I did those that way. I've gotten several off of the internet adoptions as well, and then I've also picked up some from some of the facilities. So, yeah, I've kind of like done all the above.
And when you do that, how do you pick your Mustang?
It can be tough because it's kind of like a magic ball thing. And it is always really interesting. For instance, like the makeover for the Magic, you have to go through and kind of all the trainers are picking their horses, and everybody picks differently. So for me, I always look for an uphill type horse with a longer neck. Of course, I want to have the legs put on correctly because, looking for all the soundness type things. Um, and it can be very difficult though, sometimes because when you go to the facilities or some of the satellites, like the horses can only like walk. So it's kind of based on your gut feeling. And really being able to read conformation and kind of envisioning what those horses can do. So it's very interesting, but kind of also a good tool is learning about some of the HMAs or the herd management areas and kind of like the types of horses that are coming off. Some of those HMAs are like really close. So like say for instance, if you have a Adobe Town in a Divide Basin, they're all kind of like intermingling, so they're close, but still like having an idea of those and like talking to other Mustang people, because that's kind of where we geek out a little bit. Is, oh well, my horse is from this herd management, my horse is from this, and so it's interesting to see the correlations through horses, because you can see some similarities through some of the herds for sure.
Super interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, I have people ask me that all the time, and honestly, it can go just off of a gut feeling that you're drawn to a horse.
Yeah.
And you just go with it. Like for me, I really enjoy, like every horse teaches me something new. So, not every Mustang I'm going to get is going to want an event, but my goal is to I don't need to keep anymore. I have like 6 of my own. So, really trying to train each horse to then send it on to another home to get more Mustangs out there is kind of like the goal.
Right. Okay, so now you have your Mustang, and the next hurdle ahead of you is the gentling process, right? And that first touch. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's a very special moment when you get that first touch.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a bit like the addiction part too. So you have to kind of also watch that you don't get greedy. So you get that first touch and you're like, okay, I want more. But sometimes, each horse has their own time scale, and but it's always interesting to me when that horse that's scared and it thinks it's going to die. It's been through, they're scared, and you can kind of empathize with them, and you can feel the switch. And it's really like one of the best moments you get is that first touch. And when they start to kind of let you touch them in a relaxed way too, like, because there's a lot of electricity in your touch. And so when you have a horse, you can have them, they can bow up to touch or they can melt to the touch. And so when you get that soft feel from them, it's very, very much a momentous moment.
For the most part, what are they like when you first adopt them? Like you said, a lot of them are scared. They're fight or flight animals. So, getting that first touch is difficult. So how do you find that most of them, what are they like when you first adopt them?
I've had some that I was able to sit on them in 45 minutes.
Wow.
And in a night, in a very nice, comfortable way. That was Win and Rune were pretty quick, and Fledge was too. Generally, like that, my average Mustang that has a pretty nice brain on it, I can hop on it probably in 3 or 4 days, but that's kind of how I build my trust. So, because what I feel like once they let me up on their back, that is where they're the most vulnerable, right? Like predators getting on their back. But once they can trust you to be there, I feel like the relationship builds a lot more. And like I said, that's the way that I use trust. But I mean, on average, I feel like they're not easy. They make you work for it. And you have, just like with any barn you walk into where you have horses with degrees of difficulty, it'll be the same with Mustangs. Like some, they make you feel like the best trainer in the world because everything can come easy. And then other ones, they make you feel like you know nothing.
Right.
So I've had some really amazing Mustangs, and I've had some really amazingly difficult Mustangs. And they've all taught me a lot for sure. But yeah, for the most part, they really want to try. And once you get the trust of that Mustang, they'll try to do anything for you.
And that leads into my next question about their loyalty and that trust. Once you have that in them, do you find it different or stronger than, say, like your regular domestic horse?
I find it very similar to your event horses, right? So, and your thoroughbreds too. So thoroughbreds and Mustangs kind of correlate to each other. They're underdogs. They're horses that have a lot of try. They have stereotypes, right? And they tend to have big hearts for you. Once you get it, it's just they'll try anything for you for the most part. Like if you've done your homework and you've put the work into that horse, then they will stand next to you, even if they're scared or worried. You have that bond with them, and yeah, it's a pretty beautiful thing.
Do you find that they attach to that person that they had the first touch with even stronger than, say, the next person?
And again, yeah, so they're all a little different, but my Mustangs definitely know who Mama is.
Right.
For sure. Like my students say that they're like Chihuahuas a little bit, but I for sure know that. And that's why as you train them, like if you're training them to rehome them to have another person, you have to be really cognizant of that and making sure that that horse is used to other people handling them and it's not just you the whole time. Because that's really important, because if they can get that bond with you, then they won't trust. Like it's a big thing to get them to trust other people. And again, some Mustangs are really outgoing and, are like, yeah, cool, whatever. Like my Rune is pretty much like a surfer dude that way. He's like, yeah, cool, let's go have fun. Someone ride me, someone play with me. But at the end of the day, he also, he knows when I call him. And or like the other day when my student fell off, he did a circle and came running right back to me like, oh, sorry, Mom. But definitely that bond can be strong. And I know of a story of there was a Mustang that was rehomed and she kind of jumped out and she got lost of her pen, and her old trainer came back and called her and she came out of the woods. But yeah, there's some incredibly deep bonds that it's like I couldn't and never imagine giving up Brune or Fledge or Win or any of mine.
So now, you have your Mustang and you've done the first touch and the gentling process and, maybe haltering, moving 4 feet, picking up 4 feet. Where do you go from there in their training, especially if you want to do something like an English discipline with them?
Well, so then once you get kind of the basic stuff of the touching, picking up 4 feet, I like to think of it as zones, like they're comfortable with their body of you touching from head to tail. Then I start mine bareback and getting them under saddle and, getting them comfortable with the saddle and walk, trot, canter, and establishing all of your normal things in a young horse of going forward and turning left and right and stopping. And kind of how I do that is start them in the round pen, and then I kind of move to a larger enclosed area. And if the horse is really good, I'll move outside a little faster. And it also helps me as well. I've taken up to using, for instance, Fledge, because he's very confident, has a very quiet energy, and he helps me a lot with ponying them. And so I can get them a lot of experience with another Mustang, and that really helps them, I think. But especially if you're kind of aiming to a competition, like once you get the horse, nice and relaxed and confident in those basic mannerisms, it's about then getting them on the trailer and getting them just exposed to all the things going. My dad lives about 4 miles down the road from me, so it's really great because it's nice short trips. It's not super stressful, and I'm able to take them to a little bit of a different facility, ride them in the ring. He also has his neighbor has cows, so just getting them exposed to a lot of stuff is really great. So then my Mustangs are really nice and confident when they go to their shows.
Do you find that Mustangs learn any differently than, say, your domesticated horse?
No, if anything, they're quicker. They can be quicker.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, well, you can take that hand in hand. For the most part, if they're not super inundated with fear, they are very quick. They're very smart. If you have one that has a high fear, it can take you longer because they're not stupid. They're just, but it's based on fear. So you feel like anything you do, you can't cross into that learning space because they're just flight. It's all flight. And that can be on I've had so many Mustangs, and I can think of 2 that I've had that have been high flight. And but I was still able to get the horse to come around. It just took longer. Versus then when you have the ones that aren't a high flight, they're, I find that they're incredibly smart. And then sometimes, because they are so smart, you have to be careful what you teach them, because they'll do that. I remember in training Fledge, and I would teach him something, and then I'd come out the next day and he starts offering it right away. And I'm like, whoa, buddy, slow down. So I think they're very, very intelligent. And again, they're super fun to teach because when you get them there, they just absorb it.
And what do you think, this is a little bit of a loaded question, but what do you think that Mustangs are good for, as far as training and riding, like the Mustang Classic is for English disciplines? Where do you see an environment where they can thrive with their new owners?
Oh, they're all around. For instance, the little mare that I have for the Magic, she's not going to be a high level event horse, but she makes a great little beginner novice. Nice little low level event horse. But then I can go take her out and she wants to chase cows, and she'll go on a trail ride, or she'll go in the dressage ring. And almost all of mine are like that. They're very versatile. And that's been the fun thing, is that, I can go and take my 2 chestnut boys, Fledge and Rune, and I can go do an eventing competition. Fledgy is more so the dressage type, so he'll go do the dressage, but he does beginner novice too. But then I can go play with cattle sorting, or they're very versatile, and I think that's what's really great is you really can do anything with them. I know they've been some amazing ones that have been doing the Tevis Cup for endurance, and but they tend to be stereotyped as a Western type horse, but they're really good movers and great little jumper. I mean, I had someone go, well, do they think you can jump, or do you think they can jump? I was like, well, we have to have a 6-foot panel for a reason.
No kidding. No
like,
kidding.
yes, like now for the advanced level of eventing, it can be a little tougher because while they can do the height, the width is where sometimes it gets some of them. But I have my little paint Mustang Y, and he's very scopy. Like, he's been schooling like the prelim level, and then my Mustang mare, when she competed up to the preliminary level too. So they're very athletic types of horses where, again, I think that's where they can appeal to a lot of people. I mean, especially in eventing, like kind of our big group of the riders and competitors are in the training level and below area. So that's a big gap, and those Mustangs fit perfectly for being competitive in that group.
Yeah, for sure. And what do you think of the format of the Mustang Classic? If you've looked into it, it has the show jumping, dressage, and then you have the option of either arena cross country or working equitation. What do you think of that?
I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I think they were tasked with trying to make it a field where they can have people at all levels and make it fair to the horses. So I think it's nice that you're able to have a choice with kind of picking, and I do think I think it's important that we have the dressage round, because the basic flat work is really important to have on your horses no matter what. So I think I like that it's a little bit of a different competition, but it's English, and it's not just a straight up eventing competition. So I think that's the really unique part that kind of sets itself apart from even your regular makeover. So I think that's really cool.
And could you share a success story about one of your Mustangs that stands out in your mind? I mean, you like you said, you've named so many of them and you've had so many of them and still do. But if you could pick one that really stands out for you and speak to it a little bit.
Oh.
No, that might be a hard one.
I have okay. Well, I'll talk about why. So Wyeth, I got him in 2019 for the Tip Challenge that was being held in Georgia at the time. And again, my goal was, okay, because I had done the Tip Challenge a year before, trained up the horse, and I sold him to a wonderful home in Michigan. So perfect. Great. I like training one a year and rehoming it. So I picked out Y, who is a paint Mustang from Green Mountain, which is in Wyoming. And I actually also ended up getting another one because when I went to pick him up, he was lame. And I didn't know what he was lame from. So I ended up getting another horse as well as a backup, which was Eton, which that's a whole nother story. But I ended up getting Y, and because I had saw him the day before, but he wasn't lame then. And then the next day at pickup, he was lame, which sometimes happens. So I take him home. He ended up having an abscess. So, okay, no biggie. Really smart, coming along. And then I noticed he had, I thought it was like from the cut on the halter or something right under his jaw, but it smelled like a bad tooth. And so I was like, uh-oh. And, he was wild. So like, while I could touch him, I really can't, it's kind of hard to get the vet work in there in the early days. So yeah, I ended up just putting him on antibiotics, and And also you got to get them to eat food too, because they don't know how to eat grain. So I got him to do that, and he ate the antibiotics. About a month later, I got him good enough to where my vet could shoot an x-ray. Well, he ended up having a fractured jaw from apparently being kicked or whichever happens, and it was affecting a tooth. And so what I had found was basically a hole in his jaw that had drainage. So, okay, well, that's not great, because at that time he was 3 and he has a fractured tooth. And so that can lead to a lot of complicated things. And so in talking with my vet, we just decided to kind of leave him on antibiotics, kind of go through the training process, because I didn't feel like he could handle going and getting surgery done at that time, because he was too squirrely. His nickname is Squirrel. So fast forward, he stays on that medication. He did the tip challenge, and then we ended up moving down to Florida. And then when we got here, I felt like he was capable enough that he could handle being, in the hospital. So I take him to UF, and he goes and he has the surgery, and they remove the tooth and a couple of other things. But he was a very good boy, because he had to have his face bandaged every day with like elasticon, and like that's not very comfortable when you have to change the bandages and stuff. And they ended up nicking like his salivary gland. So that was really the only complication that they had, but it's completely healed now. And he just has his teeth are actually closing together where those molars were. But sometimes that gland will fill up and it puts a little bit more pressure on his face, and then so he can be a little bit more worried about things. But, so I kind of like had to start him and restart him like several times, because he would go through periods of where he was like really worried, and it was all because that pressure would put on his facial nerves, and that was affect how he's reacting. And he actually has bucked me off like twice. But now he's out competing at training level, and he is just such a good little dude, and he likes to be in his work, and he still sometimes will have a squirrel moment, but he tries really hard for me. And so I think he's a really fun horse to ride around cross country, and I'm excited to see how far he'll go. But I think next year he'll move up a level, and we'll just kind of see from there. But he's been a fun horse without, with a story behind it, that's for sure.
And what could you say to encourage people to look into getting a Mustang?
The thing about a Mustang is they will change your life in some way. So, if you're looking to kind of deepen your experience with horses, and learning about connection and just like I said, like going up a level and learning about horses just in general. Mustangs are amazing teachers, and they also teach us a lot about ourselves. So yeah, I think if you want to have experiences that help you be better, then Mustangs are an amazing way to go.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. It's really been so interesting. I really admittedly did not know much about Mustangs myself before talking to Matt last week and now you. So it's been really, really eye-opening, and I appreciate you explaining all this. And I know that it will be super helpful to everyone listening too, because, like I said in the beginning, I feel a lot of people don't know much about Mustangs, including myself. So it's really great to get an education on it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, they're incredible horses. And like I said, they have a lot of value. And I definitely think they're worth it. And yeah, so this has been really fun. And anytime I can talk about Mustangs is a great time. For people out there, Facebook is a great place. There's a lot of Mustang people, a lot of Mustang groups. I know Mustang Classic has their group that they're trying to build. And of course, you can follow me as well, Elisa Wallace Eventing, and I try to share all the stuff too to try to spread the word about the Mustangs. And there's a lot on Facebook. The Mustang community, it's a great community of people. So it's really fun to be a part of that. It's great because I know I've reached out to other people when I need help, and I've had the same for people that have reached out to me. And it's a good group of people that really love the Mustang. And so it's really fun to be a part of it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode with Elisa Wallace, and a big thank you to the sponsor of this week's episode, the Mustang Classic. Learn more at mustangclassic2024.com. You can subscribe to the Practical Horseman podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Also, tune into our mini-sode series, The FOD Pod, where you'll hear audio lessons from our favorite Equestrian Plus clips. From short training tips to how-to videos and insider access to private clinics and lessons, learn from top experts in the dressage, hunter, show jumping, equitation, and eventing disciplines with Equestrian Plus. Watch exclusive interviews and lectures, slow-motion demonstrations, and step-by-step tutorials taught by top-level pros, and explore cross-discipline topics such as groundwork, rider fitness, and stable management. When you tune into the FOD Pod, listen closely for a promo code for 15% off your Equestrian Plus subscription. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode. I'm Julia Boutenhouse, and you've been listening to the Practical Horseman podcast.